It is exactly 3 a.m. The world outside your window is silent, but the air in your room feels heavy. You felt it before, that prickly sensation on the back of your neck that tells you that reality isn't as solid as it seems. Welcome back to Signal Lost 3 a.m. Tonight we explore the thin veil between observation and existence. We've all been told that seeing is believing. But what happens when the very act of looking is the only thing keeping your world from being overwritten? Tonight's transmission, the silent alert. Lock your doors, dim your lights, and whatever you do, try not to blink. Let's begin. The digital clock on the bedside table bled a neon crimson into the room. 3 a.m. The silence of the suburbs was not broken by a scream, but by the collective electronic shriek of every device in the house. The television in the living room, the smartphone on the nightstand, and even the smart fridge in the kitchen synchronized into a single piercing 1050 hertz tone. The unmistakable soul-shattering sound of the emergency alert system, EAS. Julian sat up, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached for his phone, expecting a weather warning, a flash flood alert, or an amber alert. Instead, the screen emitted a blinding monolithic blue light. No text, no weather maps, no instructions on where to seek shelter. Just a solid, crushing hex code of sapphire that seemed to pulse with its own internal heat. Then came the voice. It wasn't the usual distorted, grainy recording of a civil servant or a local sheriff. It was a perfectly smooth, synthetic female tone, devoid of breath, devoid of humanity, yet chillingly intimate. Emergency alert system. This is not a test. A dimensional synchronization event is in progress. Do not close your eyes. Blinking is the door. Keep your gaze fixed on the blue light. Your observation is the only anchor remaining. Do not close your eyes. Blinking is the door. Julian let out a shaky breath, his eyes stinging from the sudden, aggressive luminosity. Just a hack, he whispered, his voice cracking in the empty room. Some high-level prank, some dark web interference. But the air in the room felt heavy, viscous, like he was moving through invisible water. The blue light wasn't just reflecting off the walls, it was absorbing them. His eyelids grew heavy. It was 3:03 a.m. The natural physiological urge to clear the cornea was becoming a physical weight. Every second he kept them open, the burning sensation intensified. He fought it. He stared at the blue phone screen until his vision blurred into a hazy violet smear. He blinked. It lasted less than a tenth of a second, a mere flicker of darkness. When his eyes opened, the room was different. It was subtle, the kind of change that makes you question your own sanity. The door to his closet, which had always been slightly broken and stuck open, was now pulled shut and locked from the outside. His bedside lamp, which he had owned for 5 years, was now a different color, and it had moved 6 inches to the left. What? He scrambled out of bed, his feet hitting the cold hardwood. He looked at the TV in the living room. It, too, was a solid blue rectangle, casting long, sickly shadows across the floorboards. The shadows didn't match the furniture. They were elongated, stretching toward him like reaching fingers. "Keep your eyes open, Julian." The TV spoke, its voice perfectly synced with the phone in his bedroom. "The threshold is thinning. Your observation is the lock. Do not turn the key. We are waiting for the gap." Julian stumbled into the hallway. He needed water. He needed to splash his face to shock his nervous system. into staying awake. But the instruction haunted him. Blinking is the door. If blinking was the door, what was waiting on the other side? His eyes began to burn with a ferocity he couldn't describe. It felt like needles were being pressed into his pupils. The salt in his tears felt like acid. He tried to half blink, twitching one eye at a time to maintain a constant feed of data to his brain, but the synthetic voice roared from the very walls. Synchronization required. Do not deceive the light. Dual eye observation is mandatory for reality retention. The volume was deafening, vibrating the glass in the picture frames. Panic surged. Julian gripped the hallway wall for support, but the wallpaper felt wrong. Instead of the dry, textured floral pattern, it felt like cold, damp, slightly oily skin. He yanked his hand away, a sob catching in his throat. A double blink. He couldn't help it. The reflex was too strong. The hallway stretched. The door to the bathroom, which should have been 5 feet away, was now at the end of a corridor that seemed to reach into infinity. The family photos on the wall had changed completely. In the pictures, his parents weren't smiling at his graduation anymore. Their faces were blank, featureless ovals of smooth skin, and they were all pointing at him. "This isn't real," Julian sobbed, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "I'm having a stroke, a night terror, anything but this." He finally reached the bathroom and looked into the mirror. His reflection didn't blink when he didn't, but its pupils were wrong. They weren't circles, they were vertical, vibrating slits that hummed with the same frequency as the EAS tone. Behind his reflection, in the darkness of the shower curtain, he saw a pale, spindly hand pull the plastic aside. He didn't blink. He couldn't. He ran. By 3:45 a.m., the world had become a surrealist nightmare. Julian was pinned against the kitchen counter, using his own fingers to physically pry his eyelids upward. The pain was excruciating, the skin around his eyes red and raw. Every time his eyelashes touched, the world rearranged itself into something less human. Blink 4, the kitchen window vanished. In its place was a solid brick wall that felt warm to the touch, as if it were breathing. Blink 5, the ceiling lowered. He had to crouch, his spine popping as the blue light of the smart fridge illuminated the encroaching of a reality that wasn't his. The fridge wasn't holding food anymore. Through the glass door, he saw rows of what looked like glowing blue organs pulsing in jars. Blink 6, the sound of the EAS tone changed. It was no longer a beep. It was a rhythmic, wet thumping like a massive, prehistoric heart beating underneath the floorboards of the entire neighborhood. "You are doing well, Julian," the voice whispered, now coming from the drain in the sink. "But the light misses you. Look deeper into the blue, see the truth behind the pixels." He looked at the TV. The blue wasn't just a color anymore. It was a depth, a vast sapphire ocean. He could see shapes moving behind the screen, thousands of long, spindly shadows pressing their hands against the glass, waiting for the momentary lapse in his observation. Quantum physics states that an observer collapses a wave function into a particle. By looking at his world, Julian was literally holding it together by sheer force of will. He was the anchor. If he stopped looking, the wave function would collapse into something else, something their side had prepared for aeons. I can't stay awake," he groaned. His vision was tunneling into a pinprick. The blue light was becoming a vortex, pulling his consciousness toward the screen. His muscles began to spasm. The lack of oxygen to his brain, combined with the sheer psychological trauma and the blinding blue light, was forcing a total system shutdown. He looked toward the front door. He wanted to run outside to see if the world was still there, or if he was the last person left in a blue box. He dragged himself across the floor which now felt like soft, pulsating meat, hissing as he moved across it. He reached the handle. He pulled. The door opened to nothing. Not a street, not a night sky, not even the neighbor's house. Just an endless, infinite expanse of that same sapphire blue. There were no stars, no ground, just the void. He was no longer in his house. His house was a hollow shell, floating in their dimension, held in place only by the dying embers of his sight. "The door is almost open," the voice whispered, now coming from inside his own head, vibrating against his skull. "Just one more. Give us the key. Surrender the observation." Julian fell to his knees. His eyes were raw, the capillaries bursting, turning the white of his eyes into a map of red rivers. He looked at his hands. They were starting to fade, becoming translucent, vibrating at a frequency of 60 hertz. He was becoming digital. He was becoming part of the signal. "Please," he whispered, a final plea to a god that wasn't listening. "Stop." "We are not stopping, Julian. We are arriving." His body betrayed him. The central nervous system overrode the consciousness. The muscles in his eyelids, exhausted and screaming, finally gave way. Julian felt his eyelashes meet. It felt like the closing of a heavy lead vault door. In that moment of darkness, he heard a sound, not a beep, not a voice, but a collective, satisfied sigh of a billion mouths breathing in for the first time. Julian opened his eyes. The pain was gone. The burning sensation had vanished. The dry, scratchy feeling of his corneas was replaced by a strange, cool moisture. He was standing in his living room, but the room was perfect, too perfect. The colors were oversaturated like a high-definition render. The air was sterile, smelling of ozone and silicon. There was no dust, no imperfections. He looked at the TV. The blue screen was gone. In its place was a message in stark, white serif text. "Connection established, host accepted, reality overwrite, 100% welcome to the new frequency." Julian tried to move his arm, but it moved with a slight digital lag, leaving a trail of ghosting behind it. He tried to speak, but no sound came out of his throat. Instead, the synthetic voice of the EAS issued from his mouth, vibrating through his chest with mechanical precision. "Thank you for letting us in." He walked to the window and looked out. Millions of people stood on their lawns in the 3 a.m. darkness. They were all perfectly still, their eyes wide and unblinking, glowing with a soft, monolithic blue light. They weren't looking at the world. They were being used as lenses. The invasion wasn't a war of ships and lasers. It was a war of perception, and they had won the moment he closed his eyes. Julian's world didn't end with a bang. It ended with a blink. A momentary lapse in attention was all it took for the signal to find a home. Look around your room right now. Is that lamp exactly where you left it? Is the door to your hallway truly open, or is it just waiting for you to look away? Thank you for tuning in to Signal Lost 3 a.m. If you're still seeing this, it means you're still the observer. And remember, the blue light is always watching back. Sleep well, if you can.